I'd like to introduce you to Kieran. Now, Kieran is 8 years old. He goes to a school in Lancashire, and for the last 3 years, Kieran's been battling and fighting cancer. And no one really knew, apart from his family and his classmates, that this was going on, possibly the school community, until back in April, he wrote a blog post about the last 3 years and the struggles he'd been going through to tell the world about his battle with cancer. And this blog wasn't a fake blog, it's a real blog, it's a class blog, and it's open to the public. Anyone in the world can see what goes on that blog, and more importantly, anyone in the world can leave a comment for the children's writing when that's on there as well. The teacher, well, nothing gets on there without the teacher approving it first, okay? And he wrote this blog post, and it was approved, and within 48 hours, Kieran had over 100 comments from around 12 different countries, encouraging him in his struggle, with people commenting, saying that they had cancer 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and were leading great lives and had been really successful. And it had a really big impact on his outlook on his future. Now, there are loads of children around the country and around the world who are in classrooms where they are writing for an audience of one, okay? And if they're lucky, then their head teacher might see their writing. If they're really lucky, their writing might get put up on a display somewhere. But in reality, what's happening is the children have an audience of one, and that's their teacher. And the rest of the time, all that writing goes into their writing books, the hospice for writing, we call it. Nobody gets to see that writing. And as teachers, we rely so much on the relationship we develop with children to get the very best out of them. And that's okay for some children. But for some others, they need a little bit more. And the impact blogging can have, I'll talk about that a little bit later, on standards, number one, but actually their attitudes to learning can be transformational. And there was one boy in my class that actually nailed it, why blogging was so important to him. Because Thomas in my class, and for those of you who are teachers, you will all have had a Thomas, okay? Thomas in my class, he was a year 6 child, really struggled to write and use punctuation at the same time, okay? I could give him a closed procedure sentence and he could punctuate it. I knew he knew how to use punctuation. But when he was writing and concentrating, he really struggled to put in any punctuation. And it was a target for him from September onwards, and we're talking, this was now February. It was a target, it was stuck on his table, it was in his book. I'd spoken to his parents about it. It was kind of even on the back of his chair. We were doing everything we could to try and make him see that. And he wrote a blog post on the class blog about Bolton Wanderers being beaten by Manchester United. It was a little match review. And he got lots of comments, but one of the comments stood out. It was from a gentleman in Australia called Mr. Gilbert. And he said in his comment that, I'm from Bolton, now living in Adelaide in Australia. I watched the game last night. It's a shame Bolton narrowly lost. Hope they can, get better and bounce back. And he ended the comment with, "You might just want to use a bit of punctuation, Thomas. It would really help the reader if you did." And from that moment, Thomas started using punctuation in his writing, in his books, on his blog posts, everything. Now, I should have been pretty happy about that. But I was a bit narked off, to be honest. And not one for giving him a public execution in front of the rest of the children. I did call him over because I was intrigued. And I asked him, I said, "Thomas, since September, I've been on at you about using punctuation in your writing. It's been your target, it's here on your table, it's on the back of your chair, it's in your book. I've even spoken to your parents about it. And you've not done it." And then Mr. Gilbert turns up from Australia, and suddenly you're doing it. I said, "What's all that about?" And he just looked at me, and he looked me straight in the eye, and he nailed it. He just looked and he said, "Well, you're not real, sir." I said, "What do you mean I'm not real?" He said, "Well, you're just a teacher. You're paid to help me." Mr. Gilbert gave up his spare time to help me. Oh! You can feel the pain, can't you? And I took it. I thought, you know what? I need more Mr. Gilberts. And that was the drive and the passion for me to start working with lots of different schools to bring audience and purpose to the children. Now, I also want to introduce you to Ellison. Again, Ellison is in year 3. And she wrote a blog post about her struggles with diabetes. She didn't know anyone with diabetes. No one in her family had diabetes. No one in her school had diabetes, but she wrote some an informative blog post about some of the technical stuff and how she deals with things. And overnight, she got 40 comments from lots of different countries, from people who were encouraging her, saying, "Oh, I have diabetes too. I'm 68, and I've been in the military, or I've done a parachute jump, or a bungee jump, or lots of different things." And those comments transformed her outlook in terms of what her battle is like and how she can move forward with that. And suddenly, she felt like she wasn't alone. There were other people like her because we were able to connect her with lots of different people. Now, the impact we've had with this has not only been on standards of writing, but when I was a head teacher and a deputy head teacher, I fell in love with data. And if you're a school leader, you kind of have to, this climate, fall in love with data. And I did. And all the projects I work with children, with schools now, we always survey the children at the beginning and the middle at the end. So we can collect evidence for those people who need the evidence, and we know who they are. But we do collect the evidence. And some of that evidence that's come back has been really, really interesting. Not only the standards in writing that have been pretty well documented, but in terms of the attitudes and the changes to the attitudes to learning for the children. And one of the clusters I've worked with in London, and there was a lot of children involved in this, they, at the beginning, said that, 17% of the children said that writing was the favourite subject. A year later, halfway through the project, the same children sat the same survey after we'd introduced blogging to them, so they could do this from home as well as at school. And that had shot up to 57% of the children said that writing was the favourite subject. And we could take out more data from the questions they were answering. And one really interesting thing is about screen time. At the beginning of the project, out of the 88% of the children that said that they had an internet-connected device at home, 92% of those children said that they used it for gaming, and it was 5% of the children said that they used it for writing. A year later, the gaming had come down to 71%, and the writing had gone up to 27%. As you can see, on average, the swing, I should have a swingometer here, but the swing on average is about 20% what we're seeing with the schools doing this in terms of a sway away from your YouTube and your gaming towards writing outside of school. Now, whilst you are the audience today, I want to challenge you to think again and look again at what role you could play in this. There are schools up and down the country, worldwide, that were projects that we're running with. In fact, one of the projects, we've got 750,000 children working on this, connected to each other, commenting on each other's writing. And there's nothing more they love than a comment from real people, from real places. And I want to challenge you, after today, is to keep an eye on Twitter. Anything like that you can see where people are putting shout-outs for a blog post that wants somebody to leave a comment, that you can do that and make a real difference to the child. Maybe you're from somewhere where that child is talking about. Maybe you know somebody that can help bring something into that child's classroom or something like that, but you can make a huge difference, okay? Now, I will end by just, I did talk about Kieran at the beginning and his battle with cancer. And his initial blog post was all about, he was desperate to ring that bell. And I just want to share this image because I do know Kieran. And I want to share the fact that he did get to ring that bell. And he blogged about it too. So that message to you is really think again, look again at your role. And I'm pleading with you that you can make a difference to children by finding the class blogs locally to your schools that you may well live with and leave them a comment. They will absolutely love it and they'll also reply. Thank you very much.